Race, whether we wanted to or not, was a major factor in political campaigns. Going back to some past elections, a number of political advocates ran off simply from racial issues. For instance, George Wallace ran a straightforward racist campaign when running for governor when he lost in the past to an opponent who used racism to win the votes. But does race still play a part in today's political campaigns? Oh, sure. Back in the George Wallace era, there was a different lifestyle for both African Americans and whites through the Jim Crow laws. But now, since this is a new day and age, does racism still play a part in trying to win elections? Are politicians that headstrong to win that they would pull this infamous race card just to sway the voters to their side? Surprisingly, the answer to that question is yes. During the 2006 senatorial race between Democrat Harold Ford Jr. and Republican Bob Corker, the Republican National Committee aired a televised ad in which a young, attractive white woman states she met Harold Ford at a Playboy party and winks at the camera while saying, "Harold, call me." A New York Times columnist wrote, "The advertisement was a clear effort to play to racial stereotypes and fears, essentially playing the race card." This ad was an example of race baiting, which are campaigns implicitly primed to activate whites' negative racial prepositions. I suppose, in the end, the ad was a success, due to the fact that Ford lost with a 48% of the vote. Here is another example of a campaign that used racial agendas. This time it's the GOP candidate for governor, Tim James, who wanted to eliminate how the driver's license exam was administered in 12 different languages in the state of Alabama.
I'm Tim James. Why do our politicians make us give driver's license exams in 12 languages? This is Alabama. We speak English. If you want to live here, learn it. We're only giving that test in English if I'm governor. Maybe it's the businessman in me, but we'll save money. And it makes sense. Does it to you?
He states that those who want to live in Alabama need to learn English because that is the language they speak. Mind you, America has a diverse population that makes up its 312 million residents, as stated by the U.S. and World Clock by the U.S. Census Bureau. If you would cut all 12 languages from this exam and only use English, wouldn't that cause a deficiency for the state of Alabama? What would happen to federal funding for Alabama? What would happen to Alabama's cultural diversity? What would happen to Alabama? There are many factors to think of when making racial decisions for the whole of a state. David Vitter and Dan Finelli both have ran a campaign ad in which they criticize a person who has a darker or brown complexion than others through emotional attachments people have towards a certain ethnic group. To further divulge on the meaning of that statement, here is Dan Finelli's campaign ad where he compares a brown-skinned person to a Caucasian.
I'm Dan Finelli with a little bit of common sense for you. Does this look like a terrorist or this? It's time to stop this political correctness and the invasion of our privacy. Let's face it, if a good-looking, ripped guy without much hair was flying airplanes into the Twin Towers, I'd have no problem being pulled out of line at the airport. I'm Dan Finelli, and I approve this message.
A terrorist. He is directly labeling people of the Muslim, Arabic, or even Middle Eastern persuasion as a terrorist. As for David Vitter, his issue was with his opponent Charlie Melanson in the 2010 Louisiana senatorial election and illegal immigrants. Vitter slandered Melanson by stating how Melanson welcomes illegal immigrants to the United States, how he made it illegal for illegal immigrants to get taxpayer fund benefits, welfare checks, and he even voted against allowing police to arrest illegal immigrants. A racial campaign just to win an election? Vitter won, according to the HuffingtonPost.com. In conclusion, racial campaigns are still, in fact, in existence even after the George Wallace era. In fact, both Vitter and Wallace have won elections through racial campaigning. But perhaps not all racial campaigns have been successful. Maybe some have been backfired.